Okay, hi everyone. My name's Matt Williams. I'm the Managing Director of Connection Systems. We're an Australian-based firm that provides systems for realising business value. So I'm really glad that I got to follow Hugh because what we're talking about, there's certainly a number of synergies. What I want to do today is talk less about the Agile approach, so I'm glad Hugh covered that, and talk more about how an Agile approach to program and project management can help us to hopefully realise more value with less waste. So just to start with, let's have a look at a textbook definition of benefits management. So a textbook definition, the identification, definition, tracking, realisation and optimisation of benefits at an initiative and portfolio level. This comes from a UK publication called Managing Benefits. All very good, well and good, high and mighty, but in my experience, when I ask people on the ground, what's the real life definition of benefits management? It's what you do after you've delivered the project, or the thing you do once you've spent all the money. All right, so I'm here to say that, well, I think there's an opportunity for us to apply a benefits management approach early in a investment life cycle, and projects, programs, portfolios, at the end of the day, they're business investments, they're capital investments. So I think we should have a similar approach to the way that we make our selection of those investments and then how we review the investments. So I guess, the point being, if I've got $100 and I put in £100, I put it in the bank, I don't then forget about it. I check to see what the interest rate is. And if the interest rate is better somewhere else, I take my £100, hopefully £102 by the end of the year, and I move it somewhere else. I don't just say, well, you know what, at the time, that bank account was the best investment, and therefore I'm just going to let it run its course. No, I look at the break costs and I decide, well, if I'm better off moving it somewhere else, then I will. So why don't we do the same with our investments in organisations? Now, one of the main reasons is people, and people don't like their egos getting bruised, and Murray talked about that before. Hopefully we can move those people somewhere else. Hopefully your organisation's large enough, you can find somewhere else for them to hide. But so anyway, let's have a little talk about that. So, why do we need to change the traditional approach? And so I guess, I've come from a background in aerospace and defence, so I appreciated a lot of what Murray spoke about. And in there we're talking about traditional project management in my thinking. These are construction engineering projects, they're quite long time scales, and the outcome and the output are generally fixed. We know what we're delivering, and so then we deliver it and we have an asset. So if we think about building Crossrail, look, whether or not the expected passenger numbers end up matching the original business case, at the end of the day, we've got a dirty, great big tunnel and an asset that we can use over generations. When if it comes to a service delivery program or a transformational change program, and Geraldine, I don't know if she's still here, but she spoke about the NAO report, which talked about the Major Projects Authority, or IPA now, which I think is a fantastic document, by the way. If you haven't read it, I would recommend you taking a look. Merv was kind enough to send it to me when it first came out. Of the £511 billion worth of projects, 2/3 of them are transformational or service delivery in nature. So they're not the traditional projects that we're used to running. So why are we applying the same tools and techniques to these new types of investments that we did to these traditional investments? And earned value is a great example. I come from an earned value world. I started at a company who developed probably the leading earned value system, particularly in the aerospace and defence industry, called Cobra, which is now owned by Deltec, who are one of the sponsors of the event. And so I know all about earned value, but I always thought that it was a misnomer. It's really earned budget, because at the end of the day, the only value you can earn in earned value is the budget. Now, once again, in traditional projects, that's fine. What is the value of a submarine? It's $1 billion, I guess, £1 billion, because that's what we spent on it, and that's the asset price, and that's what the accountants tell us is how you value an asset. It's what it cost. But if I'm now building a new service delivery platform and I do it badly, is the value of the asset that I've built what I spent on it or the value I destroyed? Okay. All right, so let's move on. I've got 20 odd slides and I'm on to 2, so I apologise. Might be a little bit all over the place, but that's where my head is at the moment. So, the world's changed. The world's biggest retailer is Amazon. They don't own a single store. The world's biggest accommodation provider, Airbnb, owns no hotels. And the world's biggest taxi service, Uber, doesn't have a single taxi. All right, so the world's changed. It's topsy-turvy, it's upside down. Will it right itself? I doubt it. I remember at university being told the only constant is change. At the time I thought, yeah, that sounds great. What does that really mean? But I think we're living it now. We're experiencing it. The only thing that's happening for certain is that change is happening faster and faster. So what we need to do is, we don't have time to say, you know what, we've got a 3-year program, wait quietly. When we're done, we will come and present you with the product. And then you can tell us whether we got it right or not. So what we have to do is we have to move from this approach where we have no value, no value, no value, and then ta-da, here it is, to let's deliver as much value as we can early. Of course, what I'm talking about doesn't apply to building a submarine. At the end of the day, you've got to build it. I'm talking about the 2/3 of the projects that are transformational or service delivery in nature. We don't have to apply the same concepts. And so what we can do is look to deliver value early. Let me give you a quick example. University of Technology, Sydney. They were going to do a very big system replacement project because the users said, oh, the system's really hard to use. So IT went, no problems, we can build you a better one. So they went through the process of scoping out this new system until one business analyst, and Hugh, you're right, business analysts have a very important role to play, said, I'm just going to go and talk to the users. And found out that the reason the users said that the old system was hard to use was because they didn't quite understand how to use it. So she wrote a quick reference card and handed it out to the users, and satisfaction shot through the roof. And so unfortunately there were some annoyed IT people because they didn't get to build the new system they really wanted, but fortunately they saved a massive amount of money, and the thing that we often don't value enough is risk. The uncertainty of a whole new system. Is that new system going to add value or will it destroy value? All right. So, you know, I think we need to spend more time at the front in planning. So going back to Geraldine's comment earlier, more time in planning, making sure we understand what the scope is, what the actual business problem is that we're looking to address, and then we can get on and do the delivery well. And, you know, I always say I'd rather have the argument about what the program investment is meant to deliver early, right? A lot of what we do is around business case development, the work that we do. And so my experience has been that generally business cases are there to justify an investment. Now the problem with that is that what we've already done is decide what we want to deliver, and now we just need the funds to go ahead and deliver it. And so what we do is we speak to multiple sponsors or stakeholders, and then we try and find a way of weaving all of their requirements into one document so that every one of those people who is going to sign off on it can see what they want out of the investment. The problem there is that if you do that, you can end up with very large business cases, and we just can't deliver it all. It's not going to happen. But we get everybody on board, we get the justification, and we start to deliver. It's only later in the process that it becomes clear we're really not going to satisfy everyone's requirements. So we're much better off moving that up the front, and you know, we use outcome maps as probably one of the key drivers of that. So let me just move on. So we have a 4-step investment process that we look to apply. And so let's just run through each of those 4 steps in turn. The first step, identify. So identification is not just about what we're going to do, but what the business benefits are, going back to what Hugh said. And so if you're interested in some other light reading, apart from the NAO report that I mentioned before, this was a great document that came out from the PMI. Every year they release a Pulse of the Profession. The Pulse of the Profession is really designed to sort of set the agenda for the Project Management Institute for the year. So this came out in March 2016. And so what they said was that, you know what, we've got to stop talking about delivery and we've got to start talking about strategic alignment. And so they said, well, where's the link between the business executive and the delivery team? Well, it's benefits. That's the measurable and benefits, measurable improvement resulting from an outcome. Right, that's the definition I like, very simple. So that's how we can measure whether we're delivering value. Okay, so the Pulse of the Profession says, and I quote, not only are project results failing to improve, but they're actually deteriorating. So we need significant change. So we need to move to a shared discussion between executives and project managers on the topic of identifying benefits at the outset of a project. Okay, so identifying benefits. Obviously, just like risk management, it's a process, it's not a step. Identifying a risk isn't the answer. You know, as the starting point, you then assess the risk and you then mitigate the risk. In the same way, identifying the benefit isn't the end of the process. It's the start, but it's a great place to start, and it doesn't happen nearly enough, and to the right level of detail. So there was a question before, I think it was of Geraldine, to Geraldine, which was about not just benefits but outcomes. And I think it's a very good point. We've got to be very clear about what it is we're looking to deliver, and then we say, can we measure that thing? Okay? And if we can't measure it, it's not a benefit. Okay? If we can measure it, great. Then what is the value and over what time? Because that then gives us a baseline against which we can measure. All right, so why is it with a business case? So in just about every project I work in, business case contains a time, it contains a cost, and it contains some expected returns. And then we go and measure those time and those costs religiously. Monthly status reports, fortnightly. I've got a customer doing them weekly at the moment. But how often do they go back and remeasure their benefits? How often do they go and say, you know what, those assumptions we made turned out not to be true. And therefore, the whole premise of this investment perhaps needs to be reviewed. It doesn't happen. Okay, let me move on. So, what defines project success? This is now going back to Geraldine's talk. She mentioned that in the NAO report, there are 2 dimensions to project success. And when I ask people what the 2 dimensions are, they usually say, oh, Matt, you poor deluded thing. There are 3 dimensions to success. There's on time, on budget, and to the required quality. What Geraldine's report said was, no, that's just one dimension of success. Yeah, you've delivered, that's great. We call that project management success, but that's not project success. Project success is delivering business value or creating business value. I don't want to misquote you, Geraldine. Okay, and so there's the source down the bottom. All right, so what's wrong with what we're doing today? This comes from PricewaterhouseCoopers, 2014. Almost 40% of initiatives we do aren't actually aligned with our organisational strategy. So we've got to make sure that when we identify the work we're doing, it's actually delivering some value. Okay, and so we need to link execution with strategy. If we do, this is last year's Pulse of the Profession from the PMI, they said that organisations who do that, who select the right projects that are focused on strategic alignment, deliver more projects successfully. Not really surprising, is it, when the people who are investing in those projects understand the value that they're getting and therefore see the results, the outputs, as value and therefore as success. So, how do we achieve strategic alignment? Select the right projects. What are the right projects? Okay, I'm just going to quickly run through this one. The problem is often we're comparing apples with oranges when we come to portfolio selection. There are very few organisations that I see that have a consistent approach to creating business cases. And so we allow all sorts of rubbishy assumptions to work their way in, and double counting and triple counting of benefits to try and justify, and if you ever hear the word justify and business case in the same sentence, run a mile. Right? So the problem is, it's whoever has the biggest benefits wins. And if you tell the truth, if this is your project and you tell the truth, you may not even get funded. You're out. So you lie. That's the game. It's the nature of the game that we've built. Okay, so let's now move on. Let's imagine we do get our project selected. We then need to plan for success. Planning for success, I think, is very important, and it's underrated, as I mentioned. Let's have a real life example. Managing successful programs. Is anyone here familiar with MSP, managing successful programs? I would hope, being in the UK, that almost all of you are. It is the home of MSP. So what I like about this is straight from the MSP manual, this is an outcomes map. Okay? What's really good about it is they've got these things called intermediate benefits. Notice how they happen early. Now this is the Agile part. Maybe a lot of MSP practitioners don't realise they're applying Agile, right? It's just, actually they kind of apply it. They start with identifying the outcome, and from there we will then do other things and we'll get further outcomes which will get us to our end benefits, more jobs and more people moved and what have you, right? The issue that I see is that very rarely does anyone actually go back and say, well, what does more frequent trains mean? Tell me, what number are we going to have 6 months from now, 9 months from now, 12 months from now? What does success look like? You know, it's not enough to say, oh, well, in 5 years' time. Well, that's great. In 5 years' time, I might be doing something else. I'm just working on a project at the moment in New Zealand. 5-year-long program, $500 million New Zealand dollars, that's about 250 million pounds. And the business case actually says that all the benefits will occur 6 months after the end of the project. Now that's great for the person who got it signed and now spends a couple of years delivering, and then they get out of there before they realise that the benefits haven't come. There's no way of holding anyone to account. Is the project on track or not? The answer is we don't know. They've got a benefits realisation plan and a business case. The two things are 9 months out of date. You know, they don't even align to each other. So the question about, you know, when the board then goes back to the government and says, you know what, yes, this is a good investment, keep funding me, they're lying because they just don't know. It's a nice thing about being on the other side of the world. You will have no idea who I'm talking about. All right. So we need to integrate our project and our benefit delivery schedules. Projects have deliverables and we have benefit deliverables. And this is probably the first time a lot of you would have seen those two things actually integrated, where we say, hang on, here is a deliverable, it's in blue, that then gives me the green. And if the blue slips, the green slips as well. It's just dependency management, it's basic scheduling, and yet we don't often apply that. And if we do, it's too late. We do it 6 months later, 9 months later, 12 months later when we review the business case. Oh, we've lost all the benefits. Yeah, you have. You knew that. The data was there. You just didn't do anything with it. Okay, so what we want to do is look to deliver more value, and if we deliver value earlier, we should actually not just end up with the same value but delivered earlier, but we could end up with more value. And we could get into why about getting learning and being responsive enough to move to the new goalposts when the new goalposts have been set. And I'd love to talk about that more, but I've still got a few more slides, so I'll keep on moving on. So just getting to the probably the most important part is, okay, yes, we've planned, great, we've got this fantastic plan, everyone's happy with it, thanks Steve. Monitor and evaluate. Notice this is an iterative process because we need to monitor our progress against the plan. So that's why I said, how many trains? Let's go and measure it. Are we on track? Now, a lot of people tell me, well, you can't measure a lot of our outputs until we've delivered. We need to spend all the money before we can measure the outputs. And I say, yeah, that's great, we'll get onto that in just a minute. They're called lead indicators. Yeah, in my world. So, an agile approach to delivery, okay, allows sponsors to, and by agile approach to delivery I mean, we monitor and evaluate, okay? So we take the measurements and then we say, what does that mean to our business case, our cost benefit analysis? Is this still a good investment? Am I going to get best return for my £100 here or somewhere else? So, the three things this helps us to do: review performance to date versus business case at regular intervals. It doesn't have to be fortnightly, but maybe quarterly. Every 6 months we can say, is this business case still stacking up? Check that the direction and end state are still sound, okay? In the market we're in today, change is only, pace of change is increasing, it's more rapid. When we set off on 2-3 year projects, the only thing we know for certain is that whatever outcome we were looking for is probably not the right one, but we need to then have the agileness to be able to move as we see those shifting goalposts, okay? And so that's where having regular reviews and then being able to adjust as we need. And then finally, determine whether the investment is still the best option, okay? Or whether we can actually make the hard decision and move the funds elsewhere. So what does that look like? So for a business case, it might be something like this. So we've got our plan costs, our plan benefits, our actual costs, our actual benefits, and our forecasts, schedule delays, assumption shifts, external environment changes, all being put onto a single graph. So we can say, you know what, we're currently not on track to deliver the full value, but it's still positive, our payback period is X, our and then say to our sponsor, do you still want to invest? That's the current state of play. And for an individual benefit, we can do the same thing. Not only, so in this case, this benefit is planned to be $14 million, but we didn't just say it's $14 million at the end of the project, but we actually said how much will we have at the end of every 12 months, so we can measure whether we're on track. Then put into that scheduled delays or accelerations as well. And then we need to make sure we maintain the focus all the way through benefits through delivery. This is an example of some work we did with New South Wales Health. Electronic medical record program, and what they did, here is the monthly status report. The first section after the usual niceties about traffic lights was, how are the benefits going? It was a massive culture shift for them to say, you know what, answer that question. Are the benefits okay? If they are, let's now talk about schedules and budgets and risks and governance, and look at all the traffic lights they had. But at least they put benefits front and centre. And so it all starts with a business case. I've already said that. The business case is the mandate from the organisation to deliver value. It is not about justification, and it needs to include lead indicators. So I just want to we're going to finish on this. I said, a lot of people say to me, Matt, we can't, until we have SAP rolled out, which, if you hear that, you should run a mile anyway. Until we have SAP rolled out, there will be no value. So we've just got to go ahead and do it. 3 years, okay? All right, sure, all right. So let's have a look at some examples, or I say to them, yes, but you've got to understand how you can measure your performance. There's got to be something. And if you can't measure it, I don't want to be involved. So here's an example. Let's imagine you're in health, right? Public sector health. The outcome is to reduce smoking-related deaths. We might not find out the success of our program for 40 years until we can see whether people are still carking it at the rate they were. So we've got to come up with lead indicators. So one lead indicator might be smoking rates. Are you smoking today? And then apply that to what smoking rates were in the past. Let's imagine we're running an advertising campaign. So what we can do is measure our success of that campaign, not 40 years from now, but we can measure it immediately. Okay? But how about this one? Smoking rates are even more of a lag indicator, because before you quit smoking, you think about quitting smoking. So why don't we ask people that question? Are you more likely or less likely to smoke next week, or today, as a result of the campaign? So there's got to be something to measure, okay? And then those things, they're measurable. And by measurable, I mean that you can put a number against it. Percentages, or it's about customer satisfaction or employee satisfaction. If you can't measure it, then how do you manage against it? How do you know whether you're doing the right thing and your actions are having an effect? So here's another example. Imagine if the outcome is reducing staff in a call centre. That's a big way of cutting costs. So what we might be able to do is, let's say we're putting in a new self-service system. So we're going to say to customers, you don't need to ring us anymore. You can now go online and you can tell us whatever it is you need to tell us. Well, that's great, but let me leave you with this example. This was another government agency, I won't mention who. They decided that they were going to do exactly that. We can reduce the call centre size and the number of people who come into our offices by putting an app together. People on their mobile phones will be able to use it. Well, that's great. The problem was it didn't get used. They spent all the money, all the time, they developed it, probably a great app, didn't get used, because their customers were the disabled and the elderly. So they picked the wrong audience. It sounds crazy, but they didn't even ask themselves, do our customers use this kind of technology? The answer is no. So they shouldn't have built the app in the first place, they shouldn't have even gone ahead. All right, and so we need to make sure we review our investments. Remember, that they're investments, okay? And if an initiative no longer fits in our investment portfolio, have the decency to kill it, okay? No more zombie projects roaming around your organisation, consuming time and resources, okay? All right, thank you very much.